Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are exploring a really fascinating phenomenon, specifically how a deep focus on authenticity and humility can create a legacy that completely outlasts its creator. We live in a world that is just totally obsessed with virality and algorithms, but today's source material tells a remarkably different story. It's the story of a quiet life that somehow resulted in a massive global anthem. Come, now is the time to worship. If you've ever set foot inside a contemporary church service, chances are you instantly recognize that line. It isn't just a song lyric, right? For millions of people across North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and South America, it's a core memory. It's a prayer. It's this profound moment of hope and surrender. The exact same melody rising up in countless different languages, completely bridging generations and cultures. Okay, let's dive into this. Who actually wrote one of the most sung songs in the modern world? Do you even know his name? It's kind of incredible to think that nearly everyone in the modern Christian world has been touched by his music at some point, yet the man behind it remained largely unknown to the broader public. He wasn't some megastar chasing stadium tours, he was just a quiet, unassuming guy whose work simply spoke for itself. Section 1. A quiet Canadian songwriter. Let's talk about Brian Doerksen. So Brian was a worship leader, a mentor, and a father who never really sought out celebrity. Born in British Columbia back in 1965, he grew up in a home where faith wasn't just a Sunday activity, it was woven directly into everyday life. As he stepped into the 1980s, right when a new wave of church music was starting to emerge, he became part of a movement that wanted to speak in contemporary language while staying rooted in simple truths. Now, looking ahead, we see a really heartbreaking reality. In July 2026, he faced a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and passed away shortly after on July 21, 2026. He was just 61 years old. But, to really understand the weight of that ending, we have to look at what he built in the middle. Music historians define a modern hymn as a contemporary-style song that survives simply because generation after generation continues to sing it. And Brian's core philosophy wasn't about showing off his musical genius at all. It was all about accessibility over complexity. Instead of using highly poetic language that few people could remember or complicated melodies that required a professional singer, he wrote words that an entire congregation could learn in minutes. He didn't want you to stand back and admire the songwriter. He wanted to invite ordinary people to actually participate. Section 2. Writing a modern hymn. Now, you might think a global anthem like this is engineered in some high-tech studio with a massive team of producers. But Come, Now is the Time to Worship was created on a completely ordinary day during an ordinary season of local ministry. It started organically in his local church in Canada. The congregation learned it instantly. Then pastors simply started sharing it with other pastors. Musicians shared it with musicians. From there, it got picked up at worship conferences, and finally, it hit global publishing and translation into dozens of languages. It spread across Canada, down to the US, over to Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And honestly, here is the kicker. This entire grassroots chain reaction happened entirely before the era of social media, before streaming algorithms, before viral internet videos. It spread the old-fashioned way, literally one church at a time. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive contrast between traditional music industry metrics and the metrics of a modern hymn. On one hand, you've got pop music success, right? Billboard charts, solo performances, and fame that is often incredibly fleeting. On the other hand, you have modern hymn success, congregational singing, global translations, and absolute timelessness. Brian Doerksen's success completely defied modern industry standards because his music never, ever tried to place the songwriter at the center. Section 3. Faith in the Fire. To truly grasp his legacy, we have to look behind closed doors for a minute. Brian valued relationships way more than recognition. Like countless families, the Doerksen family endured seasons of deep suffering and uncertainty. But rather than hiding those struggles, he actually let them deepen his work. He wrote honest songs in the very midst of pain. He viewed worship leaders as servants, not performers. And why does this matter to us? Because his authenticity and vulnerability about real-life suffering resonated so deeply with people. They recognized he wasn't pretending life was easy. He was choosing hope in the middle of pain, and that translated directly into his music. Which brings us to a deeply poignant reality. 61. In 2026, Brian publicly shared that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. That news sent shockwaves through Christian communities worldwide. And just days after making that diagnosis public, on July 21, 2026, Brian passed away at his home in British Columbia surrounded by his loved ones. He was only 61 years old. Instantly, tributes poured in from around the globe. And they didn't just praise his melodies. People remembered his profound humility, his kindness, and his quiet encouragement to younger musicians. Ultimately, he gave millions of people words to pray, especially when they just didn't know what to say themselves. Which brings us to our final section, a legacy beyond fame. So what is it that truly gives a song the power to outlive the person who wrote it? The simple truth is, this song has outlived the man. Over the course of his ministry, Brian unknowingly became present in the most meaningful moments of millions of people's lives. When a congregation gathered after a tragedy, his music was there. When families celebrated baptisms or weddings, his music was there. At youth camps and funerals, his words were there. It proves that authenticity and a genuine desire to serve travels so much farther than pure ambition ever could. A great musician performs for an audience. A great songwriter gives generations a song to sing. Brian Doerksen didn't build an entertainment brand. He built a pathway for people to connect, to find hope, and to sing together. It really makes you wonder, in our fast-paced, highly digitized world, are we just performing for an audience? Or are we leaving behind something authentic that generations will carry with them long after we're gone?